I knew as soon as I made that decision, sorry, yes, thank you. I knew as soon as I made the decision that some of the planning applications would be withdrawn, which is exactly what's happened. So the agenda is not exactly as I feared it might be, which is why I divided it into two, because I feared we might be having 9 o'clock at night with a full local area council. This was after the planning. So I have divided it. You know, I'm a military guy. Order, counter order means disorder, so I've left it as it was. We'll be meeting for the other part of the agenda that members have kept on Monday the 24th at the same time, 1 p.m. here. So today we will be going through the planning agenda, and certain items have been withdrawn from the agenda, 2 items, and I also will be including on the planning agenda item 16, because there's a sort of, shall we say, comparable aspect to it. The Newton Common report will be dealing with that as well as the last item on the agenda. So I'll go through it, and then I'll be handing over to the Vice Chair of Planning, Councillor Colin Hardy, after I've gone through the procedures here. So have we, first of all, any... Well, first, the procedures to be followed at the Planning Committee are just that you will be given the statutory time for speaking, and that's strictly timed. Please, speakers, everyone must know that, and that if you exceed that allocated time, I'm afraid you'll be interrupted and told that your time's up. So please, you don't have to spend all of it, but please don't go over that time in the interests of a proper and fair balance. And the chair of the planning side is Councillor Hardy, and I'll be, frankly, handing over to him when I've got through these minor items. And the next item is the apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence, Councillor Rebecca?
Yes, Chair, we've had an apology from Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much. Oh yes, he's not well. Got that. Minutes of the meeting of the Northumberland Local Area Council.
Disclosures.
What have I missed?
Disclosures.
Oh, sorry, I do beg your pardon. Thank you. Jumping ahead far too quickly. I've done disclosures of members' interests. Are there any disclosures of members' interests? I'll start first of all with Councillor Bridget in front of me.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. On the advice of the lawyer here today, I will be speaking with regards to item number 6, but I will not be taking part in the subsequent debate or vote on the matter.
Thank you. That's clear. Councillor Swinbank.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a non-registrable personal interest in item number 10, so I'll leave the meeting for that item.
You'll be leaving the meeting and not participating. That's clear. Thank you. Sorry about that. Can we then move on to the minutes of the last local area council meeting, pages 3 to 8, held on Thursday, the 18th of November, as circulated, and I require them to be confirmed as a true record.
Move acceptance, Chair.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Now we're going to item 5, the determination of planning applications. And at this point, I hand over to Councillor Hardy. The floor is yours, Councillor Hardy.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is...
You're not on board, still on.
Thank you. We're here to determine the planning applications before us, to request the committee to decide the planning applications attached to this report using the powers delegated to it. And the first item on the agenda is item 6, 21/03106 full. Demolition of the existing convenience store Class E and construction of a new retail food store Class E to be occupied by the Cooperative Food Limited, Mace Convenience Store, Townfoot, Roughbury, Morpeth. And there will be a presentation on that by the officer.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. As members will be aware, late submission has been received from the adjacent landowner disputing the timeline of events relating to discussions that took place with the applicant regarding potential use of the land adjacent to the site. An update has also been circulated, which was received this morning from the agent, setting out their version of events. Whilst these are noted, they do not affect the assessment of the application, and the recommendation stands. There are another couple of updates just regarding some typos and a couple of paragraph errors in the report. There is the paragraph numbers from paragraph 7.7, page 15, where it goes 7.7 and then 7.6 again. So they just need to you just need to bear that in mind. There is also a typo at 733.
It's just that Councillor Renner-Thompson's just entered the room, so in order for him to take part, it would have to start again. I know we were very briefly into it, so it's a decision whether you wanted John to restart his presentation or not.
I think I would rather than implement Councillor Renner-Thompson to vote. I think I would rather Councillor Renner-Thompson exceptionally. Is that acceptable? Yeah.
Starting again. Okay, no problem. One more. Okay, if we're all ready. As members will be aware, a late submission has been received from the adjacent landowner disputing the timeline of events relating to discussions with the applicant regarding use of the adjacent plot of land, either for use as a car park or indeed for a construction compound. An update has also been circulated, which was received this morning from the agent. Whilst these are noted, it's not considered that they affect the assessment of the application, and the recommendation still stands. In addition, there's a minor error in the paragraph numbers, starting at 7.7, page 15. Where it goes 7.7 and then 7.6, obviously that should be 7.8 and so on. There is then a typo at 7.33 on page 19, where the word not has crept in and shouldn't be there. The proposal is in accordance with the emerging local plan, however only limited weight can be given to that policy. So obviously we have the proposal for the demolition of the existing convenience store at Town Foot in Rothbury. Its replacement with a new larger store to be occupied by the co-op, who would be moving out of their existing store on the High Street. This plan, aerial photograph, just shows the location of the site just to the east end of the village centre, and just on the south side of Town Foot. This is a map just showing the precise location in the centre of the screen there. The hatching, the overlaid hatching there denotes the fact that it's within the conservation area. And there is the existing site plan showing the existing building as it stands currently. We then have the existing and proposed site plans. So you can see the proposed building is quite a bit larger than the existing one. Proposed plans for the new store, shown ground floor, first floor and roof plan. Proposed elevations and a close-up of the front, the proposed front elevation there. Some site photos for you. That's obviously just a picture of the store there from across the other side of the road. And then those two are taken at an angle, one looking down the street, one looking back up the street. So the principle of the proposal of a new retail store in the centre of Rothbury is acceptable. The scale of the proposal is in accordance with policy S17 of the ANIC core strategy, which allows for new retail up to an area of 500 square metres within Rothbury town centre. The existing store, yes, it's quite a bit bigger than the existing. We're looking at 475 square metres on the ground floor, 406 of which would be retail space. 168 square metres back of house space, which would actually be at first floor level. The existing store is approximately 315 square metres, so there would be a net addition of approximately 330 square metres. Highways. Discussions with the agent and the highways manager have taken place to address concerns raised by the parish, the local member, and members of the public in terms of both highway safety and potential need for additional parking on the site. It is recognised that there is no additional parking being offered on the site. However, the proposal does include 2 electronic vehicle charging bays and an accessible bay to the front of the store and an upgraded bus stop. The existing bus stop is right out the front. It would be moved slightly to the east. The replacement store would not lead to a significant uplift in journeys, it is considered, above and beyond the journeys that are made to the existing store. Obviously, we'd also be losing the existing Mace store, so there may be some uplift, but it's not considered to be significant. There are conditions, including request for a demolition and construction method statement that would be pre-commencement. Also, conditions are recommended to secure adherence to a service management plan and to ensure that the proposed highway works are completed prior to first use. In respect of conservation, I've obviously mentioned the conservation area already. The building is within the Rothbury Conservation Area. The Council's Conservation Officer has raised concerns about the impact of the proposals on the conservation area, noting that the existing building has a positive impact on the CA and that all development proposals must preserve or enhance the heritage asset. The level of harm has been identified as less than substantial. The MPPF states that this harm must be weighed against public benefits arising. The applicant has provided a comprehensive list of benefits in accordance with this, including economic benefits, retention of the post office, job creation, etc. They've also provided justification for not retaining or extending the existing building, which is largely around the need for level access and thermal efficiency of the existing building and structural issues. On balance, it's considered that the benefits outweigh the harm identified, subject to conditions securing details of materials and the design of windows, etc. Further to this, Public Protection have offered no objections subject to conditions relating to noise. Obviously, it's a town centre location, but there are residential properties nearby, so we need to be able to control that. Obviously the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now have public speaking, and the first speaker is Chris Holt. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. My name is Chris Holt. I am a local resident. I live in Lee Square, which overlooks the site and the main road. I do, however, have previous experience in the planning field. I headed up development management teams for over 15 years, and for 10 years I was a government planning inspector. I don't think there's any objection in principle. A new co-op store would be a big improvement. I do have concerns about highway safety. The applicants have failed to assess parking demand in this part of Rothbury, and the officers seem to have gone along with them. I'd like to look at paragraphs 7.26 to 7.33 of the report. 7.27, the NPPF has been selectively quoted. Paragraph 111 says that applications can be refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. The concerns here are nothing to do with cumulative effects on the road network. Paragraph 112 refers expressly to the need to minimise conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles. The applicants point to a need for 8 parking spaces under the emerging local plan. No mention is made in the report about how many spaces are needed under the adopted policies. If spaces are not provided, there is a policy conflict, so it's misleading to say otherwise in paragraph 7.32. 7.28 and 7.29, the officers acknowledge that the proposal will displace problems from one part of the town to the other, but then seem to conclude that that's okay. I couldn't follow the logic of that. The argument that there will be no overall increase in traffic is misleading. The co-op wants to sell a wider range of goods. They're looking for increased footfall. The store would be much bigger than the present one. The upshot must be that there will be an extra demand for parking spaces. Nor is it right to assume that most people living close to the site will walk. Rothbury is built on steep valley sides and people will drive rather than carry shopping up a hill. Consideration of alternatives goes as far as looking at the adjoining land. It's no big surprise to anyone locally that that isn't available, and that's just about it. What about providing parking on the site itself? It's a deep site, it already has an access and parking to the rear. There's no evidence of why that can't be considered. The officers have not even raised this option. So what are road conditions like? The applicants don't say, and neither does the report. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with this part of Rothbury. If you can defer this decision for a site visit, I would urge you to do that. In the meantime, let me describe some of the issues. The application site, unlike the present co-op store, fronts the main road through Rothbury. It's a busy road used by large commercial vehicles. Provides the main road access to Upper Coquetdale. It's used by lorry traffic in connection with quarrying, logging, forestry and all the farms further up the valley. It's used locally by farm tractors and trailers. Lorry traffic passes through morning, noon and night. There are limited parking spaces, many taken up daily by the staff of the businesses on town foot. Delivery vehicles compete for these spaces. Drivers of large vehicles passing through stop to shop. There's parking by local residents, for example, Springfield Terrace, who do not have their own on-street parking. Users of holiday lets, for example, above the barber shop. And any remaining space is taken up by shoppers and visitors. This demand creates parking pressures, which leads to double parking, notably by drivers of commercial vehicles and parked cars overlapping road junctions and residential accesses, such as the one where I live. Parking pressures extend up Brewery Lane, a quiet residential street now heavily parked up, and at that street provides the main pedestrian access for children attending the local first school. Where excessive demand for parking spaces occurs, drivers on one-off short trips typically do not drive around until they find a space further away. My experience from my professional past is that they will park indiscriminately, especially to do the kind of top-up shopping that the co-op caters for. And this has increasingly been our experience as local residents, and you will see repeated reference to this kind of behaviour in the objections. Visibility coming into Rothbury on the main road is limited. The road is narrow, there's a blind bend. Straight after it, drivers encounter parked vehicles and pedestrians. On-street parking has got worse recently, extending right round the bend. Badly parked cars severely limit the visibility for drivers exiting from the residential accesses. The one where I live serves 24 dwellings. In my case, I often have to pull out into oncoming traffic in order to see. Is that my time? Can I conclude?
No, I'm afraid the time is strictly adhered to, so unfortunately you will have to leave the rest of your presentation. Sorry, so we move on to the next speaker, which comes under elected members, and that is Councillor John Devon.
Thank you, Chair. Rothbury Parish Council accepts that the new purpose-built convenience store is required in the town, absolutely. However, the Parish Council does have concern about that particular site. Town foot, that part of the town, is very, very busy. We anticipate there would be an increase in footfall. The new store would be larger. Certainly compared with the existing Mace store, it's much bigger, and therefore a proportionate increase in vehicle traffic. The existing co-op store is situated on a busy thoroughfare, but with the traffic passing at approximately 10 to 15 miles an hour, and it's light traffic. Whereas the proposed new store will be on a main thoroughfare onto and out of the town, passing the store at 30 miles an hour, pedestrian and vehicle traffic accessing the businesses, shops and restaurants in town foot, as well as the residential units at Lee and Wright Square. It's a very busy part of town. In addition, directly opposite the store, Brewery Lane at the junction at Town Foot is access to a large residential estate and to the first school, and a very significant increase in traffic is seen at various times of day, particularly around the beginning and end of school. And if possible, the Parish Council would urge members of the Planning Committee to carry out a site visit one afternoon at the end of the school day to see the problems for themselves. Having considered all the documentation submitted as part of the application, I believe the proposed conditions of approval are inadequate and they don't address the matters of parking and road safety. If members are in fact minded to approve the application after deliberations, we wonder if it's possible to ask that matters of road safety, parking and traffic congestion in town foot might be carefully considered by a detailed focus report by an independent highway expert, and any recommendations form part of the conditions of approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now have Councillor Stephen Bridget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was happy for the Parish Councillor to use some of my time. I've left the majority of my notes on my desk on this, so I'm going to speak from some notes that I've got. But to say this application arriving at committee in its current format is a disappointment would be an understatement. I've been a member of the Planning Committee for a number of years now, and I've seen how difficult it is for members to reach decisions on particularly controversial applications. In my view, I don't think this is a particularly controversial application in respect of the development of a cooperative store. I think everyone in Rothbury is fully in support of a new cooperative. It is long overdue. The fundamental problem we have with this is the traffic management and the problems it is going to cause. For those of you who know Rothbury, the current cooperative is on the High Street. It is difficult to park there now. It is difficult to park at Town Foot now. And what is being proposed is taking one parking problem, adding it to another to create one large problem, and no mitigation being given to address the problems being caused. In fact, we're resulting in a net loss of car parking spaces as a result of the 2 electric charging points being put in, because not everyone uses electric charging points, and not everyone uses electric charging points, but nobody else can use them because you can't block them. So I'm a pragmatist, and my worry is with this application that if you refuse it here today, it stands a pretty good chance at appeal. That's my biggest worry. And I know that from speaking to the officers with regards to it. But my other worry is, and I'm stating this on record, if this scheme goes ahead without sufficient mitigation for parking, I firmly believe someone will be seriously injured or killed there. Because of what is on the site, the 2 bus stops, it's used by the children to go to school. So what I would propose, and I can't propose it, but what I would suggest to the committee that you seriously consider is some stringent conditions, if you are minded to approve this application, that involve 12-month monitoring of the parking with a requirement done independently, by the way, because the report that's been delivered as part of this, I'm disappointed in Highways Development Management taking it for verbatim, but I would like it if the committee could potentially look at some stringent conditions and an independent report commissioned over a 12-month period, whereby the applicant then has to provide parking mitigation based on that report.
Thank you, Councillor. We now have a speaker who is supporting the application, and that is Ben Harvey. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, can everyone hear me? Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much. My name is Ben Harvey. I'm from Sansec Developments. I'm the applicant for the site, acting on behalf of the Co-op Food Store. It's probably worth giving a very brief history to this. It started with discussions with the Co-op from I think 2018 to 2019, identifying that yes, they do have significant problems in their existing store. It is compromised in its internal layout. It is congested in its internal layout. That in turn presents problems with how they deal with their customers, certainly over the recent COVID period, how they manage that, but also the knock-on effect as to what it means to them with regards to means of escape. Disabled access into their store is very poor, and so on and so on. So they have always identified that their existing space is no good. Typically, the properties on High Street are of that nature, which do not necessarily accommodate the modern day arrangements for convenience-led food retail. So they completed a alternative site review over a long period of time with us and found that Rothbury is very, very challenging for a number of reasons. Physically because of those buildings, but also highways is an issue, and we've fully understood that from the off. We came to realise that the Mace convenience store at Townfoot was regarded as the most preferable location from the court's perspective, and indeed ours, because it currently benefits from exactly the same use class. It is convenience-led food. It trades as such. It does a little bit more in different ways. It sells more papers, but then the co-op sells more food. It's a difference in product range. But the point is, it's the use class that is already here, and indeed its importance as the location for the local post office, which is, obviously provides a vital service to the town. Now, we have since come to an agreement to acquire the property from the owner of the Mace store, which is due to complete, I think it's March, April time this year, and that is part of their retirement plan. The only challenge with that is his retirement plan means it shuts, and that also means post office shuts. So we have worked with the co-op to try and set up a temporary arrangement at their existing store to try and accommodate that, as long with an outreach service if needs be, with a van rotating whilst we work out a new provision for post office run by the co-op. So the benefits associated with this are economic and social. Through construction, there will be more employment during the construction activities. There's a one-off boost associated with the construction works, and indeed there are long-term jobs then created out of the new store. I think there would be an increase of 15 jobs based on what's already already in place at the co-op at High Street. There will obviously be an annual benefit in terms of employee salaries for the area, and indeed the co-op will then achieve what they hope out of a new store arrangement. Most notably, it is, in no particular order, accessibility, certainly for disabled people, space and circulation, product range, enhancing and improving that, active frontage, creating vitality and a safe place to be, sense of community, and so on. The point here is we recognise that there is a highways issue within Rothbury. There is an inherent issue where, on analysis, our surveyors suggested that it could be the tourists coming to stay, and they are parking on street for longer periods of time, leaving the car, they're going walking for 8 hours. And there appears to be a lack of parking turnover, which basically clogs up the spaces. So we recognised with the highways team and discussed it with the case officer, and the crux is that the existing Mace store can currently trade successfully without concern, and does so very well. So that's one thing. We agreed with highways that we wouldn't be generating more traffic just because the co-op are looking to sell more things. It ultimately represents a consolidation within the area, so it is displacement.
Thank you.
Okay.
Unfortunately, you have also run out of time.
Thank you.
So the next part of the agenda, Councillor Thorne has got his hand up.
Thank you very much.
Questions from the members. Nearly all of our speakers have highlighted highway safety as a problem and car parking. And, as a sort of fairly local guy myself, I do appreciate what a busy little town and community Rothbury is. It's often quite difficult to get a car park space if you're shopping there. So my question to Chris Mead is, can you alleviate or help us with some of our sort of highway fears that, there is a solution to this problem? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorne. Highway safety, let's start there. Anecdotally, evidence-based wise, Rothbury doesn't have a current accident problem, and when we look at planning, we're only allowed to really consider what's happened in the last 5 years to form an accident evidence position. I understand that there's interest in the fact that this co-op may be busier than the existing Mace store, but I can't fathom from the existing behaviour in Rothbury, which doesn't result in accidents, to the behaviour that would occur because the co-op's moving location, that there would be an inherent risk to anybody over and above the current circumstances, which anyone using the high street, whether they be a young child going to school, whether they be an elderly person that struggles with differences in gradient, etc. So in highway safety terms, it's very difficult for me to have established a severe risk position, so I haven't. In terms of the parking capacity, I really do get the local concerns. The survey work, I appreciate that there are reservations from many locals about the work that was done, but it has identified that parking is close to the limit in Rothbury, and turnover is a problem in Rothbury, but those are existing issues which I would need to demonstrate that this application on its own makes so much worse that it would be unacceptable in planning terms. So what I've done is I've assessed the existing use and the existing floor space of the co-op. I've assessed the existing floor space of the Mace and the fact that it has a 4-bedroom flat which accommodates it as well, which it does have some parking to the rear, but it would be hard to assume that it's more than really 1 or 2 spaces. Okay. I've taken all of those floor spaces, so I've taken the existing co-op and I've allocated 5 parking spaces against the local plan. I've taken the 4-bed flat, I've put 3 spaces against the local plan, and I've taken the 315 square metres, which is the existing Mace floor space, and I've made 7, so that's 15 spaces in total. So currently, in planning terms, the high street requires those 15 spaces to work, as it does. It's not perfect. There's definitely scope for improving the parking in Rothbury, generally speaking, but currently in planning terms it benefits from these 15 spaces. When I take all the floor spaces, which are going to be resultant from the relocation of the co-op and the abandonment of the existing floor space, which will no longer have it won't generate any parking because there's no use associated to it, that will have to come back itself as something else in the future. The new proposed development only introduces 13 parking spaces when you balance out those floor spaces. So those 2 parking spaces to the rear that were part of the parking on site have gone. Or, as Councillor Bridget has correctly pointed out, EV parking is only for EV purposes. So again, those 2 spaces are 2 which are lost by the provision of only needing 13. It is a planning exercise, it is a numbers game. I appreciate that that's not always the human interpretation of these matters, but from my perspective, I just can't find a flaw in terms of what's there currently, what's there now, and I appreciate Rothbury has mixed views on the parking, but I don't see how this application strikes anything other than a planning balance.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you. 2 questions. The first, it's obviously a different part of Northumberland from where I am, the other side of the northern patch. Could you just talk me through the situation, the retail offering in the whole area, and the nature of the new shop in Thropton? Is that because I tend to agree with what the speaker said, a larger store, the logic that that's going to be higher footfall. I follow that logic rather than what's in the report. It is moving from what seems a village shop to a supermarket or a smallish supermarket. So could you just tell me more about what the retail offering is Rothbury with a view to understanding this sort of footfall and likely uplift in car parks out there? That's my first question. And the second question, it's not whether you think this is a good idea or anything, but just the legalities around it. What Councillor Bridget suggested about is it a 12-month review period with an independent inspection with a view to doing car parking mitigation. If you could just talk about, thinking a bit ahead in this discussion, the sort of legalities of that. Could that be a proposal that was made? What Councillor Bridget suggested.
Councillor Hill, thanks. In terms of your first question there, the nature of the retail, in the area, in the wider area of Rothbury, it's already been pointed out. The existing co-op store is up on the high street. It's in amongst a range of quite a good range of independent shops. There's butchers, bakers. There's a toy shop, various other bits and pieces going on up there. To my mind, moving the co-op store from where it is down to town foot doesn't really impact on that. I think people who are going shopping down the high street, they're popping in and out. They might go to the co-op for a couple of items. They might go to the butcher's for a couple of items. That's not. I don't see that changing particularly. Changing shopping habits just because the store has moved location particularly. The other thing you mentioned there is the new store in Thropton. That is coming online. That's well under construction now. It's a petrol station and associated shop with it. That, as I understand it, is going to be your typical petrol filling station, so it will be selling a range of smaller items, sandwiches, milk, newspapers, all that kind of thing. So there is, there will be an element, I would think, of people who certainly live up the, further up the valley, of them not coming into Rothbury for those items so much when they can stop in Thropton and get them. So there's a balance that there may be a decrease, an element of a decrease in journeys being made, whilst yes, there may be a slight increase in journeys being made to the larger co-op store.
So just to clarify, the shop in Thropton is a petrol station which has a shop attached to it.
It's a petrol station in Spa, so it's a reasonable size.
I'll start question to Councillor Hill, and then maybe Liz or Joanne will like to assist. There's certainly nothing wrong with a planning condition which is monitoring. That conditions like that can be used. The independence issue, we can't dictate who does work. It is our statutory responsibility to make sure the planning outcomes are correct, and that's what my team does. So we review work in front of us, and if we have to rebuttal it, we will. Once the co-op is live, that will speak for itself anyway. If there are any concerns, then local issues will be immediately raised, because it's very easy to pick on those points and point them out once they start happening. So I see no problem with that. Just so you understand, the co-op's going to have the only delivery and servicing management plan in the town anyway. We're going to be able to coordinate that with planning enforcement. All the other developments don't have such a condition because they've been around for so long that they've they've been able to service the way that they do. So when things go wrong with the co-op servicing, if they go wrong with the co-op servicing, we'll have mechanisms to contact them and work with them, and that will be live planning. So if you want a monitoring period on the parking, you can have that form of wording, probably not to be worked up now, but probably something to delegate for the chair to sign off on if it's minded to approve.
Thank you. Councillor Castle.
Yes, as the local member knows, I'm very familiar with Rothbury, being a regular visitor on my motorbike, but nobody recognises me with the helmet on, sat outside the Vale Cafe. I know it extremely well, and I'm well aware of its traffic problems. Is everybody else familiar with it? It was asked, should we have a defer for a site visit? Before I go any further, do other members feel that they would benefit from seeing the situation, which, frankly, I can visualise very easily? I just wonder if that is the case, Chair. Is it worth deferring, and do other members think that it is worth going to have a look and see at some particular time what we're talking about here? Difficult question, I know, but I'm asking it.
I'd agree.
I personally myself know Rothbury very well. I've traded in the area for a large number of years, but maybe one of the officers could answer that question moving forward.
Yeah, so members, you can decide to go for a site visit. What we would need is a proposal and a seconder so that you can take a vote. Obviously, you have to set out the reasons for why you want to go out on the site and what it is in particular that you want to look at that you haven't got before you today. Obviously, the highway safety is a key conversation point. We've heard from the speakers and the local member about the concerns that residents locally have about the car parking. We have a lot of reports and information that's been submitted and reviewed by the highways officer that's here today, taking you through the highways impacts at all different times of the day. So you have to decide, is that site visit going to inform you any better than the information that you've got before you today? But as I say, Chair, the starting point is if we decide you need a proposal, a seconder and a vote. But that's what you've got to ask yourself when you decide if you're going to vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. I know Rothbury very well. I think it's charming, a charming town. It shares with Wooler, how can I put this, lovely Cheviot towns which you want to visit, and it's full of independent retailers, which makes it even more interesting. So I'm not so much concerned about traffic because unfortunately none of our towns and villages in that area were built for 21st century traffic. And so we're never ever going to sort that out, ever. But my issue mainly is because it is right as you are entering Rothbury. And I just thought, demolition, is that necessary? I mean, yes, of course, I realise that a lot of work needs to be done internally, but I just think it's going to make Rothbury look on entry as one of those towns you go through and you don't even remember what it was like. I just think a very modern frontage will spoil the entry into Rothbury. So I would not be voting for this application.
Can I just, Chair, can I just remind that it is questions to...
On a point of order, Chair, can I ask through you, the question of a proposal was mentioned by officers. Would that have to wait until questions are over, or could that be made at this point?
If all members of the committee are happy that they've got no further questions, then you can make a proposal, but some people might still
Could I
want to
just
make
interject
questions.
there? It was a question because I wanted to know from John, is demolition the only option?
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. It's certainly the option that's been presented to us, obviously, and the applicant has put forward justification for that, namely accessibility reasons. The existing building would not meet current accessibility regs. By demolishing and putting a new building in its place, it would have level access throughout. issues were also raised regarding the building structurally. They wouldn't be able to open it up sufficiently to be, to give them the space that they need to lay out the store in the manner that they want to. So yeah, I mean that's that is the option that's being put to us, and obviously we've had to assess it on that basis.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to ask one question, but when we've been talking, I've got two, so if you bear with me. First thing I would like to say is I visit Rothbury frequently, and I know it well. A site visit would be of no benefit to me. The question that I would like to ask the officers is, the co-op, as we know, is in that funny little street, which is slow-moving traffic. It's quite congested, but you can usually get through. Are we not making it worse by putting it down on the main thoroughfare, which the parish councillor quite said about the heavy wagons going through there, which don't go through in front of the co-op at the moment, nor do the buses, nor anything else. So the question is, are we not making it worse? And also, the whole proposal from the co-op has got to be logical to make more money, which means more sales, which has to mean increased footfall. It means more people will go. I've also heard there's going to be 15 new jobs. Well, if you know Rothbury, you know that it's highly unlikely that all of those people who have the new jobs will live in the town. They'll be from the surrounding areas, and that will also increase the number of the pressure on parking for that area. So I'm torn, because I think the co-op would be wonderful to have a new store in Rothbury, but I'm torn because of the problematic issues there. The second question I have is Councillor Bridget's idea of having it monitored for a year. Can I ask the officer what would happen if at the end of that year it's seen that it's not satisfactory? Would we close the co-op? Would we tell them to go away? What would we do?
Chair, hello. Can I answer those questions? And I may bring in some colleagues as well as we work through them. I just wanted Councillor Watson and all the members to just take a step back here to what you're assessing, and remember that the starting place is what your plans are asking you to do. So what your development plan here, you've got an application, it's the relocation of a co-op, and it's relocating that co-op into another retail unit within the village centre. And so in effect it's a like for like, okay? And what your development plan policies are saying is that is acceptable. We want to see shops of this size and scale in this location in Rothbury, and that is your principal planning policy there that you've got to look at. So you've got to ask yourself, does this application meet what your policy is asking? And our opinion is, yes, it does. So it really matters less that you might feel that the other co-op is better located for traffic. What you are looking at is what does this proposal say in line with our development plan? And the development plan is saying we want to see developments of this size and scale in this village centre. So I just don't want you to take your eye off that test and how you go about making your decision. The second question I think you asked, Councillor Watson, is about the increase in footfall. And again, so that's looking at the scale of the proposed development on this site. So again, what your plan is saying is that this is an acceptable proposal in this location. And we have looked at the scale and the size of it, and we're saying that that is acceptable as well. It may well increase some of the footfall, but that could be also by foot or by bicycle, given its location in the town. And again, that will have been looked at by our highways manager, and Chris might want to talk us through a little bit more about whether they have considered that as they've appraised the impact on the traffic. And I think the final point is, Councillor Watson, you are right, it's much harder to retract if we find that after 12 months there is a severe highways impact. it's not the kind of development you would give a temporary consent for 12 months because of the cost of the investment. But there are ways and there are other things that such assessment might bring up that need to be looked at on a larger scale. For instance, maybe there is something to be done broader and outside of the planning process about dealing with traffic and car parking turnover of spaces in that centre as well. But yeah, that's right. We couldn't retract the consent, but it would help highlight and flag problems, and we may be able to continue to work with the co-op to be able to resolve those.
Thank you. Councillor Swinbank.
Sorry, it's all right. I was waiting for eye contact from the councillor before speaking. The existing co-op is serviced, and it's serviced with 3 to 4 key deliveries per day, and it can use a large articulated lorry if it wants at the moment because it has no restriction on it, because it's allowed to use the road. And if anyone's tried to go down that section where you park and has someone that informally doesn't know which way you're supposed to go in Rothbury, and then you get stuck and then you're trying to decide, should I reverse or should I wait, or am I going to get a space? That's part of the game in the busy area when these servicing vehicles turn up. But let's not forget the Mace is also delivered currently, and that's actually deliveries with 6 lorries a day, because it doesn't consolidate in the same way Co-op does. We've taken the actual delivery data from the Mace, and we know that that has 6 vehicles a day, which is a mixture of large articulated lorries. So the new Co-op will have fewer deliveries outside the frontage, and we're restricting that use to only be rigid vehicles. So the Co-op won't be introducing articulated lorries into the village anymore. It will only be introducing rigid, and we think that that's acceptable as a way to make sure that that happens. The other thing that the Co-op does, which the Mace can't do simply because it's a different business, is the Co-op backhauls its waste. So there's not a need for additional refuse collections to take place in that location as well. So the actual delivery strategy that's proposed for the Co-op is far fewer large vehicle arrivals in the village in total.
Thank you. Councillor Swinbank.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion with regard to traffic. On the high street in the town, because it seems to me there's only one, I might be wrong, but there's only one, which is an island crossing. Is this been assessed, and is it adequate, considering that if there is going to be extra footfall to the new store? And obviously that's the first question. The second one is regard EV chargers, which there is some discussion of in the report, and I'm not entirely clear where it's going, in the sense that I'm all in favour of EV chargers, but obviously people come into this store, quite a lot of them will be coming for a short period of time, and putting slow chargers outside there doesn't seem as if it would be very helpful, because people would lock those up for long periods. I don't know whether it's a suitable location for the rapid chargers, which need a rather large bit of infrastructure to sit on the pavement. So some guidance on what is being thought about with regard to EV chargers would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Walking and cycling in Rothbury is somewhat constrained by the fact that if you're in Rothbury, it's okay, but if you want to go out of Rothbury, it's not the most attractive idea to go far on foot or by bike unless you're extremely confident. The infrastructure is lacking in a rural setting. I think we can accept that. In terms of the town itself, again, this was one of those situations where, because of the combination of change, because of the loss of the Mace and the relocation of the Co-op, I looked at the lay of the land in Rothbury. It was hard to determine where the need for them to do some form of highway improvement in terms of additional dropped crossings or additional island features or anything along that realm, because people make those movements currently. I'm not suggesting that Rothbury is perfect. I'm not suggesting that Rothbury couldn't benefit from some sort of review of long-term highways issues, but in terms of the impact of this planning application, it already benefits from a shop frontage exactly where this shop frontage is proposed, and the new access is going to be in accordance with Equality Act standards. I shouldn't say that, but building reg standards which would meet the Equality Act expectations for the provider. So in that respect, I'm fairly relaxed that I took the choice. I could look for highways interventions that would be crossings and footfall and trying to help pedestrians, or we could look at other things, EV. The EV that will be proposed by the applicant will be in accordance with the current EV strategy that this council is delivering for on-street parking spaces. So the regime will be exactly the same charging regime that's currently being implemented this or next financial year in many of the bigger towns. Rothbury will benefit from having early access to on-street EV infrastructure in accordance with that charging regime, which I think is hugely beneficial in this location, because Rothbury could benefit from it, and we can secure that from this application. So on this one, it is my decision to what I think I can reasonably take from an applicant and where that intervention should go. And on this one, just to give you a rough picture, because John hasn't got one, but where the where the silver car is and the black car directly outside the mace is where the 2 EV charging points would be. And there will also be a disabled space which would be to the rear of that blue car as well. So we're also putting an accessible space directly outside that frontage for anyone who has that need.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on what Chris was saying about the deliveries would be rigid HGV lorries. Can we put a condition on to say that it has to be? Because we all know that the big companies, when they're getting the deliveries, they're trying to be as economical as they can, and it could end up being the large articulated lorries coming along as they're doing multi-drops. And I think it's how we can do it, especially if we're going to have the EV charging, 2 EV charging and a disabled parking just right outside the shop.
Councillor Hunter, I'll take that one. Thank you. The service management plan is conditioned, and the vehicles to be used as part of the service management plan are written into that plan. So yes, it will be conditioned.
Thank you. Councillor Mather.
Thanks, Chair. I've sat and listened to all these questions and answers, and being the local member for Wooler, we've been through a very similar situation where the co-op has been moved out the centre of the high street and into what I would say is quite a ridiculous location, which this seems to also be. I've got a couple of questions. One is, has the other retailers in the centre of the high street that's next to the co-op been consulted on this and how it's going to affect? Because it will affect. You say it won't. We know in Wooler it's killed half of our high street by moving the co-op. Have they been consulted? If you think people's going to walk and cycle to get the groceries, you're absolutely delusioned. It doesn't happen. If you know Rothbury, you've been to Rothbury, every way out of it is a hill similar to Wooler. People don't carry the groceries up the hills. They take the car. And when I see you've put the 2 EV chargers outside the premise, allowing 1 disabled bay, you know, that just doesn't work. I think EV chargers are a huge benefit to the town, or any town. But to clog up your 2 prime spaces, which could service 50 cars each a day with EV chargers, just seems absolute madness. I think, you know, in Wooler we've had a very similar situation where you've put a co-op in a bad position. And now, as a local member, I'm now dealing with trying to fit crossings in, which it's not safe enough to even have a safety crossing. And I think the local member for that area and the parish council are going to be having these same problems. So why haven't these been consulted and their advice taken on? Because people will have to cross that street.
I'll do the easy one first. The applicants offered 2 EV bays and to look at the parking directly outside their frontage. because within the scale of their development, their frontage is really what we think is their responsibility. It's not to look necessarily at other parts of the town. However, the commitment level's been made. They've made a commitment towards one traffic regulation order in essence, one bus stop re-provision and 2 EV charging spaces. So if you're not satisfied with the exact location of them, we can put the condition in such the commitment level is the same, but we can review where that provision actually occurs. If you don't want the EV directly outside the frontage, we've secured the commitment to it. So where it goes in Rothbury could be a open discussion, and the applicant won't have any concerns about that, subject to them investigating where that provision can go and delivering it to the same sort of cost. You are correct, and it's well recognised that the retail research that we've got from this council, 92% of people travel to Rothbury by car. You don't have a choice. I mean, this isn't a difficult discussion to have, we know it. And even if you live in Rothbury, chances are, under a lot of circumstances, you're going to rather jump in your car to get to the high street than to walk down to the high street, for many reasons. But Rothbury has that problem already, and already behaves that way. So in terms of how this co-op is going to change that behaviour, it won't change the behaviour. What it will do is displace it from the top of the high street, middle of the high street, where it happens currently, and put some of that pressure and burden outside outside those shops there, La Mensa and the other ones. But again, it's not in planning terms introducing a behavioural trait which isn't already there.
Has anyone else got a question? Councillor Seymour.
Chair, can I just clarify, Councillor Mather did also ask about whether retailers had been consulted, just whether that could be answered.
The other retailers on the high street that are going to be affected by this, have they been consulted about this move?
They will have benefited from the same level of consultation that the majority of the town has, in that the application was advertised in the press and by a site notice. They won't have had letters through the door because they're not immediately adjacent to the proposed site.
Thank you. Councillor Seymour.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've had my hand up quite a bit, but I suppose you didn't see me there. Anyway, the councillors have really gone over some of my concerns as well, which is obviously, the highways, the EV chargers, which I think is mad, actually, putting them right outside. And although I'm very supportive of EV chargers, I just think that perhaps they're not in the right place. They should be put somewhere else. And you've really spoken about that already. So the other thing is, I just wanted to ask how old the building is and the height. I mean, it's a lovely town in a conservation area, and I don't know why it cannot be restored, retained, and with adaptive reuse. So I just don't know why, especially in this heritage conservation area, why consideration couldn't be given to that. Is the footfall less? Much less? What are the measurements sort of this building if you were to do the inside compared to the new build? That's the other question.
In terms of floor space?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So the existing building you see there it's approximately 80 or 90 years old, I believe, 1930s. I think I read in the heritage statement. The existing floor space details I've got here. So the existing floor space for the building is 315 square meters. The proposed retail floor space for the new build is 406 Obviously, there would be additional space upstairs for the back of house and so on. The net additional overall is 331 square metres. It's what was presented to us, the demolition and rebuild, as I've already said. So we've taken that, we've assessed that as it's been presented to us. Again, the applicant has provided justification for why they feel they can't retain the existing building, whether that's just the frontage of it or the whole of the building and extend off the back. Primarily, they were accessibility issues. There's no level access into the existing building. Thermal efficiency of the building isn't up to the standards that they would expect of a new store, and structurally, internally, there just isn't the space for them to be able to set out the store as they would, as the co-op group would want to be able to set out a new store. So they've come to us, as I say, with a proposal for demolition and rebuild, and we've assessed it on that basis.
And also, what is the height? Is it the same height?
Now you're asking. I don't have those figures in front of me at the moment, I'm afraid, Councillor Seymour. But as off the top of my head, there's not a huge difference in terms of the overall height.
Thank you.
Councillor Thorne, did you have a question?
No, I was going to move a recommendation. If the questions are finished.
No further questions, so we move to the rules of debate, whereby we have something proposed, and there will be no speeches until such a motion is seconded. Speeches may not exceed 10 minutes. Amendments to the motions, and it is to then approve, refuse or defer this application. So do we have a proposal? Councillor Thorne.
Yes, Chair. I would like to move this recommendation. I do think this is a great opportunity for Rothbury to have a modern day convenience store, as Ben Harvey mentioned. All, modern day food retailers want a new build. They want to map out how they're going to lay out the store. They want an efficient building. They want one that's well heated. This is the reason, Wendy, that I feel this building, should be demolished. And yes, it is going to affect the conservation area, but again, we ask ourselves, was it a great building? It's so, I think it will enhance the streetscape. I do feel the Co-op has upped its game in recent years. There are a lot more of attractive ranges, and we all on the high street, which in actual fact was a side road, they're now on the main road, and I believe they will get much more passing trade. And that's where, I'm right with...
Chair, can I just interject?
Sorry?
Usually there's not a speech until it's been seconded, and I didn't
Oh,
see
sorry.
anyone second.
Well, I was speaking. I'll allow if... Yeah.
Thank you. Your proposal is put forward for approval.
It's for approval, but I would like to speak to it if somebody seconds it too, because...
In that case, I will ask if there was anyone who wishes to second Councillor Thorne's motion. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. It's a difficult one, this, but I do wish to...
Yeah, could somebody second it and then...
That's what I'm doing.
But he's speaking to the motion rather than... You know, I've sort of got halfway through what I wanted to say.
Yes, Councillor Thorne.
I only said 4 words, Trevor. Okay. I second the application. I'll say no more and I'll speak later.
In that case, could I ask Councillor Thorne to continue with...
I'll just finish off. But I do feel, yes, a lot more passing trade, a lot more visits to the co-op. You know, I cite 2 businesses in my little villages. I cite the Running Fox in Longfram, the Running Fox in Felton. Now, they have brought a lot of traffic in. And, you know, I think a smart new co-op is going to do exactly the same. And that's why I think the condition about monitoring the car park and highway safety is essential. We do that for a year and then we visit it. And, you know, Jeff, yes, we can't close the co-op down, but you can do things to improve highway safety and car parking. And I think the delivery enforcement is really important. You know, the co-op deciding when they're going to deliver their goods. But, you know, I also hope that the co-op might do some sort of staff parking scheme where they encourage their employees not to park outside, but maybe park down on the Riverside car park. But, you know, I also take up Mark Mather's point, and, you know, that was troubling me. You know, why sterilise 2 parking bays right outside your shop with electric charging points? I'm sure the local councillor can find 2 places where we can do electric charging bays that won't interfere with the business of this shop. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Chair, can I just...
Do I come back now then or not?
Can I clarify just what the motion is first? Because Councillor Thorne mentioned a condition in respect of monitoring. So just wanted to clarify the motion that we do have. Is it a recommendation to approve subject to the conditions with an additional condition?
Well, there was 2 additional conditions. One was monitoring car parking highway safety, but the other condition was to ask them to have a second look at the charging points, the relocation or location of those charging points. I think that would be a big improvement to the scheme as well.
With the wording to be delegated to the Director of Planning in consultation with the Chair.
That's exactly it. Thank you.
You're happy to second
And my
that
second of that nomination continues with those conditions.
Thank you.
Do I get to speak now or do I do need that?
Yes.
You do indeed.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Now then, as I was saying, it is a very difficult decision, this one. The problem that I see is that Rothbury has very limited space in the town, the centre of town, to have a bigger supermarket, to offer modern facilities to its residents. If you don't have it there, where on earth are you going to have it? I'm trying to weigh up the damage which will, I think, will be caused by some extra parking. I think it's inevitable, whatever we say. Bigger store, bigger footfall means more people, means more cars, more parking. It's just inevitable. But I think the benefits that the people of Rothbury will get by having a new supermarket outweigh those difficulties, in my view. So that's why I think it's something that we need to do. I know it's a continuing problem throughout the whole of Northumberland about small towns. If you don't have this, if you don't have it in the middle of the town, you have it on the supermarket on the outskirts of the town, and that in itself creates problems of what happens to the middle of the town. So all of those things I've borne in mind, and I've considered this decision before I came here as well. Having listened to what's happening today, I would say that this is a good proposal. And I'm sorry to the Parish Council and everybody else, it will give you problems. I know it will. But I think on the balance of things, it has to go forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to contribute to this debate?
Yes, behind you.
Councillor Castle.
I think I'm out of your peripheral vision a little bit, Chair. It's my fault for not waving my hand, and the legal officer might tell me I can't say this, but I'll just say that if this is to fail, this motion, I was going to propose, and wish to do it at the start, that we actually do ask members if they want to have a site visit, in fact propose it, and see how many do. Now, would that be feasible for me to say that at this point, to say that I
At this moment
intend...
in time, we have a motion on the table which has been seconded, so it is a valid motion, so it would have to be dealt with first and foremost.
Okay, I understand. You see what I'm driving at, though. So this is one of those things where I would think any member who is not absolutely familiar with this location should actually go and have a look. But there may be insufficient for that reason, and one has to respect that view. My view is this is a really difficult, unbalanced one. When I see the words unbalanced, I know what it means. It means you could get this wrong, you could get this right, and you might not know that you've got it wrong or right until time has passed after that decision. So this is a tricky one, and I'm looking at it now, and I've got to look at it in planning terms. What is in front of us is not a change of use, no question there, a change of location, and what are the implications of the change of location? They will have likely adverse effects on the traffic situation, all those adverse effects which are likely so bad as to enable us to refuse this application. Now, the Parish Council and local member will not like me saying, I think on balance they don't. So I will be supporting the application with some real concerns over the implications, because I'm not sure that I'm right here. So if this fails, I'll be asking the members that aren't certain enough to go and have a look. Thank you.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you. Just to say, first of all, if people are, if this fails, I'd be seconding a site visit if we can do it that way. If it fails, just site visit, or just it would fail.
I can propose it as a site visit.
I presume if it fails, then it fails.
Anybody can propose any motion.
If this fails, after it has been to a vote, another proposal may be put forward, and if seconded, will be debated.
Yeah, I get that, but if it fails, then it fails. What's the point in having a site visit?
Then another proposal will be asked for and debated.
I'm not talking about that. I know that, but what if it fails? Is then proposing a site visit? What's a site visit if we've rejected it?
So, Chair, if I could just add, so when you know, after, regardless of whether the motion fails, it will be an application that will go back on the committee agenda. We'll arrange a site visit. Members will be able to go out on site, be better informed. They will have more information. Some members that are here today may not be there next month anyway, and we hear all the information again. We will answer questions, you will have debate, and then you make your decision. But you'll be better informed, perhaps, after the site visit.
I get that. It's just I get that. I get you put another motion, and I get the benefits of doing that. I'm just wondering. So if we reject it, it's rejected, or it's like, but we're giving them a second chance. That's why I think it would have been preferable if we'd had that proposal first. That's what I'm asking.
On a point of order, may I, the Chair? I get that, and I wasn't caught for early enough, and I'll take some of the responsibility for that. However, if this is refused, there has to be another proposal, and there could be a proposal from somebody to refuse the application, but going against this proposal doesn't of itself refuse the application.
The only way round, I suppose, is if Councillor Thorne and Councillor Watson would agree to withdraw it to take that motion. Only if they agree to reject it. We take a motion for site visit first, but that'd be up to Councillor Thorne and Councillor Watson.
Councillor Thorne.
Yes. You know, I do feel that the case for a new supermarket has been well made. I do feel that our highways expert, Chris Mead, has briefed us on the problems. You know, it's not an easy solution, but, you know, I would say, looking around me, that, you know, most of the councillors too are very au fait with Rothbury. We've all been to Rothbury, not once, not twice. We know the problems. I don't really feel that we would benefit from a site visit. We know the parking situation. We know how it works. It is tricky. And all I'm saying is, in my particular motion, I would like us to monitor it so that we have an opportunity to go back. And if things aren't working quite right, we can, you know, manipulate them, change them in some way to make the situation better. But, yeah, I just feel
Can I carry on speaking against then?
Can I have a point of order? Clarification, unless I'm being stupid, I thought what had happens is you put a proposal forward to accept the officer's recommendation. If that fails, that means we haven't accepted the officer's recommendation, and therefore the application has failed. How can you then move on to something else?
That proposal has failed, so the
Right.
proposal to accept has failed.
There'll have to be another proposal then from the officers, wouldn't there?
No, it's another proposal from the floor from members. So you would be proposing at the moment to approve with the additional conditions. If that was not to be passed, we'd need another proposal, which could be any proposal another member wishes to make.
I've been on planning for a long, long time. I've never, ever heard of that before. Are we sure about this?
Yes, that is
This is the second one under my chairmanship that we have had a proposal put forward. It was Councillor Patterson's who then had the opportunity to table a motion which was voted upon. So at the present time, I have before me a motion to propose. You have seconded that. We are in debate. We will now move forward. Thank you.
Against then, thank you. So if this does fail, I would second a site visit. I think Councillor Patterson made a good point. Our focus is on the highways and the parking issue, but on our old favourite, this isn't a conservation area, and admitting that there's harm to the conservation area, but the harm's okay because of the public benefit. I don't buy that argument, particularly with the highway and the parking issues which have been highlighted. I think actually interesting, it's retail parks and out-of-town supermarkets get a bad press, but I think this is a sort of kind of defence of this, because you don't get those problems. Obviously, they have the space that somebody articulated, that they can build their own modern buildings. There's not really usually any sort of heritage concerns, and they've got car parking spaces and so on. I think the local member and other residents from Rothbury who've spoken very well, have really articulated it. I get the sense this isn't about a bit of NIMBYism or protecting their own business or anything like that. These are people that know what they're talking about. They live in the area and they are really obviously seriously concerned. And I don't know Rothbury very well. The people are regular visitors, but I think you have to be a resident to see it and really understand it. And I think there's obviously going to be a huge amount of problems with this. So I can't support this.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience, Councillor Renner-Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to support Councillor Thorne's motion, which was put to us at the very start, really, by Councillor Bridget. I think the public benefit of a new co-op is there. It is in a conservation area, but I don't think that's a particularly old or attractive building, so I'm not overly concerned about it being knocked down. I would enforce the point about the delivery enforcement needs to be red hot, because I've seen it done before on planning applications and then it's ignored. The co-op in Sea Houses has a habit of parking its articulated lorries in the bus stop, which causes all sorts of problems. So I would really like to reinforce that point, and also the point about the EV charging points outside the shop frontage. The whole point of those is you park your car for 40 minutes, an hour, and then walk off and get a coffee. Well, that's really not the right place, and I'm sure the local member and parish councils could find a way to put them somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to have any point of debate, add anything to this? If not, we move to a vote. And the motion before you, sorry.
Just briefly sum up, can I, Chairman?
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? The proposal that's been put in front of us was for 12-month review on the parking situation. If we get to the end of that 12-month review and we know there's works needed, whether it's a crossing point or something to do with charging, to parking, at whose cost is that to then sort? Is that because it's under review down to the Co-op to fund a crossing point or safety issues? Or is that then back to us and the local member to try and argue with highways for years to get investment? Because I think that's a crucial point, that are we going to put in this, that if there's a problem and it's fixable, then the Co-op has to withstand those costs?
Yeah, so Chair, that is a good question, and it'll all be in the way that the condition's written up, and obviously we've got delegation to do that, so we could write that condition up in agreement with the Chair and the Vice Chair along with the Director to make sure that if there are outcomes from that impact report that we think are reasonable for the developer to implement, then we could put that in, something along those lines.
Councillor Swinbank.
Thank you, Chair. On reflection, I think a site visit would be helpful on this application, so I'm going to vote against. I'm going to vote against on the basis that I think a site visit would be helpful on this application.
Councillor Thorne, in summary.
Retail in the middle of our sort of market village. We are. The alternative, yes, they could have found a site on the edge of town with a great big car park, but then it kills off the very centre that we're trying to keep alive. I know it's a problem, I know parking is going to be an issue, but we're trying to monitor the situation. We're trying to come up with some highways ideas in the month that will alleviate and improve. And I just hope that the Planning Committee might vote with me on this one today to deliver this opportunity for Rothbury. I feel the safeguards are there because we're monitoring the situation for a month. And, you know, we've all been to Rothbury many, many times. We know the situation. I know it's an easy opt-out sometimes for some councillors. Let's have a site visit. Let's not make the decision today. I feel the case has been well put by our highways team, and we should vote on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, the proposal on the table is to vote for approval. Can I ask that all those in favour raise their hands? Thank you. Those against? Thank you, councillors. That motion is carried. Moving on. Item number 7, number 8 has been withdrawn from today's agenda. So we now go on to item number 9. Application 21/02382, outlined application with matters reserved for the demolition of an existing building and redevelopment with up to 5 residential properties, Crichtonbank Farm, Crichtonbank Annex, Northumberland. Could I ask for an update from the planning officer? John, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so as with the previous application, we have received a late submission from the applicant, which hopefully councillors will have had the chance to review. Again, there's also an update just relating to the paragraph numbers on the report from paragraph 7.10 on page 85 onwards. The paragraph, there's a couple of paragraphs have been put in there without numbers, so just need to be updated. The application is in outline with all matters reserved for up to 5 residential properties at Crichtonbank Farm, just on the outskirts, about 400 metres to the south of Crichtonbank Village. So there is your site location, red line, just showing the extent, showing the location of the steading. You can see Crichtonbank Village just to the north of the image there, so across the fields. This is the site location plan showing the red line boundary. This differs from the previous outline application that was granted on this site, in that the big building that you see the site wrapping around there was previously part of the site. It has now been removed from it. That's just the site location plan there, showing the red line boundary and showing where the access is proposed to be. And then some site photos. So this is just looking from the east, down behind that big building. You can see it opens out to a field, open countryside. And then these two here just inside the site, showing an area on the other side of that building, which is currently laid to hard standing and is used to store cars. And the final image there is showing the lane down to the farmsteading from the proposed access. Just in relation to the update that was received from the applicant, yes, extant permission. Part of the site does have extant permission and should attract significant weight, but this only covers about 50% of the site due to the changes that have been made. Obviously, as I say, that agricultural building has been removed from the site, and the boundary has been moved further to the north than it was previously to encompass some of the agricultural field just to the north there. Agreements for coastal mitigation and primary occupancy. Obviously, the update from the applicant says that they shouldn't be in there as refusal reasons. That's understood, but if an agreement hasn't been agreed at the time of the decision is being made, then those those reasons do need to go on the decision notice. So the location of the site, as I say, is in open countryside to the south of Crichtonbank. There was some debate at the last time as to whether it actually does constitute open countryside or not, but for the purposes of the ANIC core strategy and the new Embleton neighbourhood plan, the site is not within the defined settlements of Embleton or Crichtonbank, and therefore, for planning purposes, it is considered to be open countryside. There were some highways concerns relating to sustainability, the connectivity of the site. Obviously, it's in the middle of open countryside, no footpaths, no street lighting, etc. So pretty much anywhere that that residents are going to go will be by private car. That said, the Highways Authority have responded to consultation offering conditions which are attached to my report. Issues with conservation on this one. The site is within the setting of the listed Crichtonbank farmhouse, and neighbouring cottages, the impact upon those designated heritage assets cannot be determined because of the lack of information that has been submitted with this application. And the Council's Conservation Officer considers that the application should therefore be refused on those grounds. It's clear that new build development is not acceptable in this location, wouldn't accord, as I say, with the Alnwick Core strategy. The key difference between the previous application and this one, obviously, is that the Embleton Neighbourhood Plan has now been made. So we've got planning policy that's bang up to date that says this is not a suitable place for new build development. If members were minded to approve the application, the decision will need to be delegated to allow legal agreements to be drafted and signed. But as it is, the recommendation is to refuse on location, heritage, and lack of coastal mitigation principal occupancy agreement. Chair.
Thank you. We have no objectors and there's no one listed from local council, so we have Mike Armstrong as a supporter of the application.
Yes, thank you very much for having me here. My name's Michael Armstrong. I've lived at Criston Bank Mews for the last 30 years. My house is directly opposite this ramshackle farm building. I'm not quite sure whether you have any further photographs of what this building looks like. You did show me a photograph around the back. Do you have any photographs of the side or the front? I understand at a previous meeting they did show quite clearly the level of how can I put it, the decay of this particular shed, this farm building. But my front door is effectively 30 yards from the side of this what can only be described as a carbuncle on Criston Bank Mews. Over the last 30 years, I've seen the whole development change from ramshackle Hemels. We now have effectively a nice little community. Mr. Gilbert, my neighbour, has really made a great job of doing Criston Bank Farmhouse, which I think goes even further in terms of listing. All of his outbuildings have been turned into accommodation. Even the pheasant farming area further down towards the railway lines, they've all been enhanced as well. So in essence, the whole place really is like a little village. From what I understand, the housing that's been proposed is all going to be in keeping with the existing buildings in terms of the stonework and also with the slates. If I could just kind of put myself, throw myself on your mercy, if you like. Last thing when I go to bed at night was I close the curtains. I look at this horrible boil on the area. First thing in the morning when I open my curtains, that thing's still there. I know the farmer is planning on absolutely removing that particular building. He intends to open it up as just pasture land, or indeed using it for crops. So as far as again, using the word enhancement, that horrible old-fashioned industrial-looking building will come down. Some houses will be added to the community, and all in all, I think that it will, well, let's put it this way. I've been there for the last 30 years. I intend to be there for another 30 years and leave my house feet first. It'd be nice not to have that particular horrible, absolute nightmare of a building remaining. If you could see the building now, and I know that the gentleman over there came and took some photographs the other day, and we did speak very briefly, but the thing is in a terrible state since the storm. Could be argued that it needs to be refixed, etc., etc. But right now, it's torn to pieces, and it's just not right as far as the rest of the residents in Criston Bank have to put up with. So I thank you for your time. I hope you'll take it on board. I understand all of the things that have been said about farmland, etc. But at the end of the day, we have to live there. Other people have to pass by. We get lots of visitors now, lots of cyclists coming through, lots of ramblers, and I'm just hoping that you can look on this favourably in terms of getting rid of that building. Thank you very much.
We now have members' questions to the planning officer and Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask John, would we be able to insist that those properties, if we were to approve it today, were for permanent resident only?
The neighbourhood plan it supports new build residential development in the defined settlements of Christenbank and Embleton, subject to primary occupancy being secured on them. It doesn't say the same for anything in open countryside, so I'm not convinced that we could insist on that, to be perfectly honest with you. And again, there's nothing in the Anacor strategy to secure that either.
Right, thank you. That's disappointing.
Councillor Thorne.
Officer recommendation and approved this application. The Embleton neighbourhood plan wasn't in existence then, though. But just tell me, apart from this big sort of agricultural building coming down, what else is the difference?
So is the red line boundary essentially originally from the access in the southwest corner there. It went straight along the road and then up the other side, up the eastern side of the building, and then this sort of grey area just to the north of the building. It came back along there, and just to the west of that is a bund. An agricultural field wasn't included in the red line boundary. The building was clearly at that time. It's no longer included in the red line boundary, so is not subject to this application. Clearly, if this were to be approved, and would be looking to put some houses rather than have houses wrapped around that building looking directly upon it, but that would be subject of a separate application for demolition.
Councillor Renner-Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. John, you mentioned that Embleton neighbourhood plan there not having a policy in for permanent occupancy buildings outside the settlement boundary, but our emerging local plan for the county has that policy. If there is over a percentage of holiday lets in the parish, do we know the percentage of holiday lets in the parish? Or, well, I know the county does. I can't remember it off the top of my head. Do you know what it is?
Neither can I, I'm afraid, no. But the other point to make there, obviously, is that it is the emerging local plan, and we can't put sufficient weight on those policies as things stand. So we would be, we have assessed and we'd be making a determination on this application on the basis of the Anacor strategy and the Embleton neighbourhood plan.
Councillor Bridget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm hoping someone can point me in the right direction. I've read it and I can't find it. How this has ended up at committee?
Because the previous application came to committee, Councillor Bridget, it was, and the previous application was decided against officer recommendation. So it was decided to bring this one back, just so, just for sake of continuity, essentially.
Okay.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick clarifications. You say in your conclusion that it's against both national and local planning policy. Is it an on-balance argument? Is it a combination of two, or is it just if the Embleton neighbourhood plan didn't exist, you would still object on national grounds? And the second point, it sometimes is a bit of a moot point, and I know you, when you talk about setting precedents and so on, I know you often come back with and say each application's judged on its own merits, but if, for example, you did approve it and say, well, it's outside the settlement boundary of the neighbourhood plan to build market value houses, would that pose issues for future applications on that precedent argument, or would it not cause any problems for future applications?
In terms of national policy, the NPPF tells us that development in the open countryside should be limited to the reuse of existing buildings, so which, you know, part of this is a brownfield site, so you could maybe make that argument in respect of the area of hard standing, but certainly not for the northern part of the site there, which is it's virgin countryside. It's part of an agricultural field. In terms of precedent, you're absolutely right. Well, we say there's no precedent in planning, but making a decision like this, perhaps makes it harder to make a decision the opposite way in a similar, in a similar location later on.
Are there any other questions for the officers? In that case, do we have a proposal? Councillor Hill.
I'm happy to move the officer recommendation to refuse.
Seconded.
Is there any members who wish to debate this? In that case, can we move straight to a vote and ask those who are voting to refuse this application to raise their hands? Those who wish to vote against this and raise their hand. Against the motion? 2, 3. Any abstentions? Sorry. The motion is carried. The planning permission is refused. Thank you. We now move on to the next item on the agenda, item 10. Application 21/03064, full new dwelling land northwest of Sutton Grange Mill, Warkworth, Northumberland. Can we have a presentation by the planning officer and any update, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As an update, first of all, we've received a statement from the applicant's agent which has been circulated to members for information prior to this meeting. Permission is sought for the construction of a new dwelling on land northwest of Sturton Grange Mill in Warkworth. And I'll just run you through some slides here. Site location plan there, you can see the application site hatched in orange. It's showing the existing access which will be utilised. To the west is the listed Grade 2 farmhouse. To the east are former steadings which have been converted and I understand are now permanent residents. Moving on to the next slide, you can see there the red arrow, that's the application site. To the left, you can see the farmhouse which is listed. Below that, you can see the tree belt and the screening, and you can see the converted former agricultural buildings. Existing site plan, the site's currently a walled garden associated with the property down there, One Garden House. Proposed site plan, they're proposing to use the existing access which serves all of the properties, and you can see there's going to be a parking area and it's going to be a single-storey dwelling taking up quite a lot of the plot there. Just to run you through the proposed plans, on the left there you can see at ground floor level there'll be 3 bedrooms and a study. So it's a 3-bedroom property. Just to run through the elevations, on the top there is the north elevation, got the south elevation, next slide showing east and the west elevation, and to just give you an idea of materials. The roof would be green sedum roof. The materials are a mixture of red brick, untreated cedar cladding, coloured render, and just to run you through a few photographs here. The photograph on the left there, that's looking southwards towards One Sturton Grange. On the right, it's looking east towards the converted farmsteadings. Again, the photograph there on the left, that's looking north within the site. And on the right, that's the existing walled garden looking towards the site. Warkworth Parish Council supports the proposal, and we've received 7 letters in support of the development, which were submitted by the agent. It's the view of officers that the development would result in the construction of a new dwelling in an unsustainable countryside location, and it would result in an alien feature, resulting in harm to the setting of the farmhouse, which is Grade 2 listed. The recommendation is therefore to refuse permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just interject? We didn't have an opportunity to ask the supporters how they were splitting the 5 minutes just before we do start that.
Thank you. I've just been reminded we have no objectors and 2 people speaking in support. How do you wish to divide the 5-minute allocated time?
I'm about 3 minutes and I think Rod's 2. But if I just speak until finish and then Rod take over.
In that case, Craig Ross, yes, if you make your presentation, thank you.
Good afternoon. The applicant studied the office report and the objections of neighbours from 2020 and has produced this new scheme. This scheme has the full support of Warkworth Parish Council and 7 supporters. The applicant is willing to enter into the UU for coastal mitigation, and although parking and bin storage is shown, final details could be conditioned. We would ask members to do so if they were minded to approve. There are 14 homes at Sturton Grange. This new home will be within the development limits on a site of a previous large-scale building. The site is clearly defined by boundary walls on all sides, and access to it will be through the existing development. Had this been an add-on that broke beyond the development limits or required a new access, we would understand the reasons from officers. However, this represents a small infill within an existing development which reuses land and protects the surrounding countryside from further encroachment. Sturton Grange is 1 kilometre south of Shilbottle and about 2.5 kilometres west of Warkworth. The existing 14 homes use the services of Shilbottle and Warkworth, which are in easy reach, and that is the same for the 12 homes and 14 lodges at Eastfield, which is about 500 metres away. This new home would fall within this rural cluster of approximately 26 homes and will access and support the services of nearby settlements. The site, location and the circumstances and the existence of 26 other homes in this cluster mean that this additional home cannot be considered functionally or physically isolated. In terms of the design, the new home is single-storey, has a green roof and takes a contemporary twist. There were CGIs to demonstrate that, but they haven't been shown at the present time. However, it will sit in the site and will not be prominent. It's screened from the heritage asset, which is some 70+ metres to the west, with intervening walls, hedges, access and services. In summary, we seek the support of members to deliver a new home, infilling a site within the development limits and forming part of this rural cluster of Sturton Grange and Eastfield. The home will not be physically or functionally isolated and will be in easy reach of Shilwattle and Warkworth. The design is contemporary and some 70+ metres from the heritage asset. If approved, a high-quality, modern and sustainable home will be delivered with the full support of the Parish Council. Thanks.
Hello, my name's Rod Galloway. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am a Warkworth Parish Councillor, but I'm speaking as an individual parish resident in support of the application. The site falls within the Sturton Grange development. It is well contained within an existing walled garden, which formerly housed a sizable agricultural building, and it does not spill out into the open countryside. The contemporary design fits in size, topography, etc. on the site. It is very low level and will not impact on the nearby listed buildings, the neighbours or the wider landscape. It's in essence carved into the site. It's a small complementary development and as such should be approved. There are no objections from consultees and in my view this represents good planning to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. It's now open for members' questions to the planning officer.
Yeah,
Councillor Castle.
Oh, thank you. You got me, yes. Yeah, the word unsustainable, I always worry about it being used. It's a very general term and often means nothing until you explain what you mean by unsustainable. And we're down here from highways saying unsustainable location. I get the insufficient parking aspect, but I don't quite understand the unsustainable location aspect. Could that be explained, please?
Okay, this was going to happen at some point. Chris may defend your unsustainable position that you've been putting around county. In July of this year, the MPPF was rewritten and it made one fundamental change to the transport element, and it said, offer a genuine choice of transport modes. New development must offer a genuine choice of transport modes, and there are locations within this county, as we discussed with Rothbury, where walking and cycling and taking up anything than a car are not available. And this is a location where you will live by your car. So we class it as unsustainable. We class it as unsustainable not just because of its distance from facilities, but because it doesn't offer safe or suitable provision. It doesn't provide street-lit footways adjacent to the road. It doesn't offer you any alternative apart from walking in the carriageway to take a vehicle. So this is a presentable position. It is supported in the MPPF. It is a change that only occurred in July of 2021. But sustainability in transport terms is about now offering a genuine choice, and there are rural locations which do suffer as a consequence of that.
Right, I think I've got that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. Just to ask of the officers clarification how they reckon it's in the open countryside when you've got housing round about it and it's in the walled garden. It's not like the previous application where it was going into the open field.
I mean, we've acknowledged that it's not an isolated location in the open countryside, but it is in the open countryside. When we're looking at our development plan policy, it's not within any defined settlements. So in policy terms, when we're looking at it in development management terms, it's open countryside.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions for the officers? Councillor Hill.
Just looking at the last line in the recommendation, you just tell us a bit more that's saying actually to prove it, the planning permission would be unlawful because of the lack of coastal mitigation.
Yeah, that's right. That's similar to sort of what John was talking about on the previous application. Should members be minded to approve this application, that could be overcome by us signing up and getting the applicant to sign up to a UU, and we would get a contribution towards coastal mitigation. Because we're recommending refusal, we haven't entered into that, and that's why this is added as a reason for refusal.
Councillor Thorne.
Harmful urbanising effect on the character and appearance in the open countryside. Are you saying that if it was more vernacular, you might have been more sympathetic, or you just don't like it anyway?
I mean, that was the advice from the conservation officer, and what she's saying is that the Sturton Grange site retains the character of a historic working farm site. So recent conversion to residential holiday let use and addition of some additional boundary walls and roads have compromised this somewhat. However, the building's age and former uses are still all readable. She's then going on to sort of say it would then, yeah, as you've said, it would be an alien feature within the centre of this historic working agricultural site. So it's because I suppose it's not, we're always going to have an issue with something going there, because we're going to have to look at the impact on the setting of the listed building. But then, you know, reading it within the farm, I think it's that this contemporary nature is alien in its setting in this case.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson. Are there any other questions? In that case, Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I think we should grant this application and not refuse it. And the reason why I think we should grant the application is it's been made absolutely clear, I think, by the other speakers. This is in an enclosed area of land. It's already got a road to it. None of the neighbours object. None of the parish council is for it. It's a good design. I don't understand the problem about car parking, because on the plan I've got here, it clearly shows 2 cars on it. Perhaps it needs some talking over to actually get it finalised, but there's two cars on the plan. The business about unsustainable, I find quite, I cannot understand it. We have passed stuff since July where we have argued on this unsustainable bit, and it's always been negated. I can think of Guysands particularly. So I just don't accept that. I think this will have absolutely no effect whatsoever on the listed building. And if we put in the coastal, which I would put in as a proviso, that we have the coastal mitigation in there as well. I can see absolutely no reason whatsoever to turn down this one house development amidst 26 in a clearly defined boundary area in houses that already exist with all the main services just off a decent road. Come on, this has got to be acceptable, and I would certainly propose that. Thank you, Chair.
We have a proposal. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Mather.
I'll second the motion.
Can I just ask or refer to planners as to whether they would be happy with the reasons before we go any further with the second? Is that all right? Just so that you may alter your second decision depending on what the reasons are and whether you're happy with everything.
Thank you, Chair. If it's okay, if I could come in here and address some of the reasons that Councillor Watson's put forward for his proposal. Before I go into the reasons, I think it is interesting, actually, Councillor Watson, that you reminded us of the Bar Hill application in Gazance, remembering that that was a conversion of outbuildings, different to this one. This is an absolute new build here, okay? So when we talked about that, remember we had some concerns even about the conversion. And the reason why we were telling you that the conversion was acceptable is because we have planning policies that tell us that conversions are acceptable in the open countryside. So our in-principle policies support that. So even if highway say it's unsustainable, what we're telling you is that your planning policy trumps that. on this one, and I do have some sympathy for these types of applications, but you're without a policy, a principal policy position. Your principal policy position is saying that we shouldn't have new builds in the open countryside. And this is the open countryside because it's outside of any of the settlement boundaries. So you don't have that in principle planning policy justification for it. And we also say that it's unsustainable from a highways perspective because you're going to be dependent upon a car to be able to get to and from it. And also there is the harm to the listed building. Now you have a qualified conservation officer there who's appraised that harm, and they are saying that there is less than substantial harm if if you were minded to agree to it, and so there needs to be a public benefit for overcoming that harm. So you would have to give that some consideration and propose a public benefit as well to that. And I think, we do talk about precedent, but this really is a precedent issue here, because once you start to allow this type of new development and new build development in the open countryside in these parcels of land that you say are enclosed or would support a development, then you are opening a precedent on that. What about if another site came forward in Barnhill and Guzants in an enclosed site, but it is a new build? Again, we would be saying as planners, you don't have a policy to support it. It may come to committee, and the question would be, what's different? What's different? What makes it different to this one today? So I would ask you to think very carefully about your proposal, first of all, Councillor Watson. But secondly, I think we do need to go through and fine-tune what your reasons are. So, why is it that, is it that you're saying that it's, I'm just trying to think about ways that you can get over that in principle policy reason. I'm kind of struggling on that myself, but it could be that you just want to say that you don't consider it isolated and that it's within a settlement.
I don't consider it isolated because it's part of there's a wall all the way around it where the rest of the development is. It has road access already up to it. You're quite right, the conservation officer said less than substantial harm, which I think normally we accept that as being a reasonable statement if it's less than. And I think that's probably the only two things I keep. I know what the plan says, but it seems strange, doesn't it, that you convert a barn and that's classed as sustainable, but if you build a house next door, it's classed as not sustainable.
Okay, so just to clarify on that, it's not the convert. We have policies to say that you can have conversion of buildings in the open countryside. So what I'm trying to say is it's on the scales, it's right up there in support of that development. We are saying that our policies are saying you can do that. We don't have anything similar for a new build in the open countryside, and that's the difference here. So I suppose you could say that although it's contrary to that in principle planning policy, your view is that because it's in a settled hamlet of housing and it's within an enclosed site, you don't consider it to be isolated and that it is acceptable.
Couldn't have said it better myself, thank you very much.
So now, Councillor Watson, the second part is that you need to address the less than substantial harm. So you would need to offer up what the public benefit is as you've assessed that. So if you're agreeing with the Conservation Officer's assessment, which I would strongly encourage you to do, they are saying that there needs to be a public benefit. So you need to demonstrate that you've considered that.
Well, it's another house, another home available for occupancy in a hamlet of 26 houses in a growing community.
We wouldn't recommend that would be a justification because, what we would say at the minute is that we are delivering well beyond our need for housing in Northumberland, and so there isn't a need. So a need for another house wouldn't be a public benefit. Some of your other members may want to. think about what the public
I'd
benefit
be
are.
grateful
But
if anybody had an answer to it. But I mean, it is, if I know the site, I'm not sure many people don't know the site, but it is a plot of land. It is absolutely saying, you know, it should be developed. It's part of a closed area. Other houses are there. It's a nice settlement. People are happy to live there. They have no objection. And I've always thought there was going to be another house there, right from the very beginning. So that's why I just think we should say this is okay.
Councillor Watson, just to go back to the conservation points, you can either agree with the conservation officer, or you can choose to disagree, and then you don't have to argue the public benefit argument.
So that means
I wouldn't recommend that, but that's you know.
So I would say it's more than substantial harm.
You would say that there's no harm at all.
No harm at all. Thank you. I will say it's no harm at all because it's a wall and it's shielded and it's 70 metres away.
Just to clarify, you wish your proposal to remain on the table to grant
I do.
permission. Thank you.
With the condition, as I mentioned before, which is to sort out the parking issues and also to include a coastal mitigation payment.
The proposal remains on the table.
And I'll just clarify that those conditions will be delegated, the wording, to the Director of Planning in consultation with the Chair. And Councillor Mather, are you still happy to second it as per the reasons and as per outlined by Councillor Watson?
I am, yes.
Councillor Castle.
Yes, this is a wobbly one. Again, there's no absolutely right answer. It's a matter of judgment on this. And the fact is, well, it's not actually an open field. If I got this wrong, it's actually got walls and they're putting a hedge there. So I don't quite see how it affects the setting of the listed building in any substantial way. No, so on balance, and you know, I came into here thinking I would probably vote with the officer recommendation, and I'm beginning to think I don't really know that there's a good enough reason to do that, and I think I will support the local members' better knowledge of the site and his rationale, which actually suggests to me that the conservation officer has pointed out that there could be, and that's all I'm saying, could be less than substantial harm. I think it's very insignificant. The fact that we're using this existing facility for housing is in the public benefit, because it might otherwise fall down and deteriorate. So I'm okay with it.
Councillor Bridget, I moved past you before. I will allow you to speak now.
Mine's just a question with regards to, obviously, one of the central tenements of planning policy is development in the open countryside. And I would like to get an understanding, because I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to vote yet, but I'd like to get an understanding of what kind of precedent will this set and what are the implications of approving an application where it is legally classified as development in the open countryside.
So this is one of your in-principle planning policies, okay? And any development, new build development that sits outside of your settlement boundaries is not where we want to see development. So it is classed as development in the open countryside. We do have exceptions to that, but this doesn't meet any of those. So just because it's of maybe that you think it's of good design or what have you, or in a good location, doesn't trump that. So this is a very strong line in the sand, your open countryside development policy. And it is, and you know, what I'm saying to you is you must think really carefully about how you approach this, because you need to be able to justify it on the next scheme and the next scheme and the next scheme. There are of anything that we have before you, there sometimes are material considerations that I'll say that you could weigh up and think about, such as the impact on the listed building here. But what you're looking at here today is a breach of a key principle plan policy.
Councillor Renner-Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. But of course, we have approved applications in the open countryside against officer recommendation before. So it's not like this is the first time that this would happen if it did go through. It sounds to me, not knowing the site particularly well, but looking at the pictures and from what the local member said, it may legally be open countryside, but in the eyes of an ordinary person, it's an enclosed space within an existing settlement. I can compare it to the walled garden at Belford Hall, which is Grade 1 listed, substantially higher, more important than this place. And they built a beautiful stone building in the walled garden there, and it hasn't made a difference to the setting of the on that location. So I could have gone either way on this, but I'm happy to go with the parish council and the local member who know the area far better than I do.
Thank you. Councillor Thorne.
Chair, I'm going to go with the planning officers on this one and vote against it. I do feel it's in the open countryside, the wider definition, and you know what clinches it for me too is the very contemporary build in a historic setting. I'll be supporting the officers. Thank you.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with Councillor Thorne and the officers. We're often told when we're minded to refuse something, we're often told, you know, just because you don't like it, that's not a planning ground. And I think the reverse has to be, even if you like something and think there's nothing wrong with it, and there's the walls and stuff, you need to think about the planning grounds. And, you know, I mean, I often find, and it's difficult, the whole planning system and the appeals and stuff, that sometimes everything's weighted in favour of development, and I find I'm sometimes following arguments and thinking that it's so weighted, you want to push towards agreeing to something. Sometimes I can't, the logic, it seems so weighted, but in this case, the very strong logical arguments to oppose this on very strong policy grounds. It's not, doesn't seem to be an on-balance one or subjective, or a member understanding exactly how the area works, like we had in the Rothbury one, understanding the parking. So I absolutely feel very confident that I should support the planners on this.
Thank you. Councillor Mather.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make the point when Elizabeth said there about open countryside. I honestly just don't believe this is open countryside. I've just got that gut feeling when you look at it. It's, you know, it's not open countryside. And I think that when we're talking about transport, that, you know, there's no other means of transport. In our wards, you're shutting down such a large potential development of community. We are trying to build on community in rural wards, and this is kind of going against that. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to support this application. And I do respect the planners, you know, your advice, I really do. But it doesn't feel right that we're saying that this is open countryside. I could see that the argument with the application before this, but not this one. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Castle.
No, thank you. Just to go back to this precedent, because as Councillor Hill's right, this is quite a strong line you've drawn. But does it totally prejudice future decisions, given that we do say each one's application must be looked at on its merits? And the merit here could be that it's so close to an existing settlement, despite the red line, that it could be seen in that context. And yet another application, which might well be in the open countryside, but is nowhere near an existing settlement, that would be a sound reason for not using this as a precedent. Am I right in that logic?
Not really. I mean, when we draw up settlement boundaries, which is where we want to see development, anything beyond that is considered open countryside. And so we're saying that we don't want to see development in the open countryside. So if you think about the application that you even just had before you just now, where we had the Embleton neighbourhood plan, you know, our key reason for refusing that was because it sits outside the settlement boundary. It's in the open countryside, and it's not what our plan policies are saying. If you're feeling uncomfortable as members about our open countryside policies, then we need to revisit the plan and put some exceptions in about when we want to see development in the open countryside. And maybe you do want to put something more in there about, you know, enclosed sites within smaller hamlets or settlements. But you know, you've got to be really careful and consistent with your decision making.
Councillor Watson.
I think it's probably right if I sum up now. I've got a feeling we're just about...
Councillor Seymour.
Catherine Seymour up there. Perhaps, Chair, I'll give way to Catherine and speak after that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just on this, a little bit concerned about this precedent that could be set on the breach of principal plan policy. And I know there's some dispute on what is countryside, and I suppose the criteria is, you know, and we don't want to, we want to see a pause or a space in between developments. So we could find ourselves where things sprawl, we could sprawl out without any pause, and I've seen this happen in other places. So not in this country, but other places where you really need that break in between. So is this, it's not considered green belt at all, it's countryside. So yeah, I suppose that's all I'm concerned about.
Can I just come in there just to clarify? No, it's not Greenbelt, it's countryside. There are sort of different, you know, you get your isolated locations in the open countryside. This isn't an isolated location, and we acknowledge that. This is within a group of houses, but it's still the open countryside when we're looking at development plan policy.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess it is a difficult one, but I don't think we set any sort of precedent, because I understand from what Gordon said, and I agree with him. Every case that comes to this committee is considered on its merits. I don't believe, in the terms that we would normally expect, that this would be classed as open countryside. It's in a wall. I'll repeat again. It's in a walled area, already enclosed, with all the houses in, which are all modern houses. They're all been built there in the last decade or so. So this wouldn't be out of place at all. It wouldn't be seen by the listed building at all. It's low. It's just, we have to consider this on the merit of those points, in my view. And I just think we should go ahead and refuse the application to refuse it. In other words, accept the application. Thank you.
Chair, I'll just clarify the proposal that is on the table before any vote is taken. So the proposal is to approve this application, subject to conditions to be delegated to Director of Planning in consultation with the Chair, and a specific condition you wanted in respect of parking, so that will be included within those conditions, and also subject to a 106 agreement in respect of the coastal mitigation contribution.
Absolutely.
In that case, if we are all crystal clear on what we're voting for, those who wish to support the proposal to grant permission, please raise their hands. Those who wish to vote against this proposal, please raise their hands.
I propose that we accept the officer's recommendations.
We now have a proposal put before us.
What was the vote? I didn't hear what
Sorry, the vote.
Sorry, just to clarify, there was 4 people voted in favour of approving, but there was 7 who voted against, so the motion failed. And we now have a new motion on the table from Councillor Bridget, which is to refuse as per officer recommendation, which has been seconded by Councillor Hill.
So we can now debate the matter further and go over what we've just gone over, or we can go straight to a vote, if you can remember which way you voted the last time. Those who wish to support Councillor Bridget's motion to refuse, please raise their hands. Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions?
No, that was everybody voted, so that's carried.
In that case, the motion is carried. Permission is refused. Thank you.
You can, because I believe you're in the chair.
We're going to have a comfort break.
Chair, can we just do the appeals update just before?
Oh, sorry, yes. The appeals update, just a note. I think I can then call a comfort break. I'm going to call a comfort break for 10 minutes, please. And if you've come for the last item, there are one or two of us a bit desperate, if that's all right. Item 16, which I included today because it's a comparable substance. today, because we have had it, we've just mentioned to note the appeals, is item 16, the Newton Common Report. And I've got to present this to the committee, Helen Lancaster. Helen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is something a little bit different for the committee today. So this is actually a follow-on report. The original report came to committee in April, so members may recall this. And essentially back in April, the committee agreed to the statutory consultation process taking place with regards to an application for a scheme under the Commons Act in relation to Newton Common. So just to remind members, the council is under the Commons Registration Act of 1965, the Commons Registration Authority for Northumberland, and as such, the council has a duty to maintain the statutory registers of common land and village greens. So this report concerns Newton Common. It was registered back in 1970 pursuant to an application dated 25th of April 1968. So in common with a number of other areas of common land and village green in the county, the land is not noted on the register as having an owner, and as such it's actually an ownerless common, but it does have the benefit as an ownerless common of statutory protection under section 9 of the Commons Registration Act of 1965. So as I say, the parish council approached the county council in 2020 and asked for a scheme to be made. So the statutory consultation was conducted. There were statutory site notices placed on site, and a statutory advert in the Northumberland Gazette was placed on 2 separate occasions. So as a result of that consultation, we only received one response, and that is from somebody who resides near the common, and that is actually attached as an annex to your report. I think that is Appendix C. Mr Thompson, who made the representation, has indicated that he welcomes proposals to protect the commons at Newton as a whole, and he notes the contents of the proposed scheme. So as I say, that was the only representation that has been received, and members should have had the opportunity to have a look at that. So the Commons Act enables schemes to be made under the Act, and if a notice of dissent, the legislation states that if a notice of dissent is received from persons representing at least 1/3 in value of such interests in the common as are affected by the scheme, the council can't proceed further to make the scheme. But as I say, we've only had that one representation, and that actually supports proposals to protect the common. And so we can't see that as such that would be classed as a notice of dissent. With regard to taking a decision as to whether a scheme under the Commons Act can be made, members should be satisfied that the scheme is necessary or desirable for the proper management of the common. And with regard to that aspect, it would, if it were to be made, enable more to be done as regards the management of the common than would be the case without a scheme. Examples in the report are those given in DEFRA guidance. For example, the erection of fences on the common without a scheme would not be permissible, but with a scheme it would be permissible. And so should members resolve that a scheme be made, then they would then need to resolve upon whether it's necessary or desirable in the interests of the proper management of the common to delegate the management of the scheme to the parish council, which is what the parish council requested. So members are therefore requested to resolve upon the 2 proposals put before them. I should say that there is no actual recommendation, but if you look at the start of your report, it does ask that members firstly consider whether to approve the common scheme at Newton Common, and then, if you agree to approve the scheme, you are asked whether you wish to agree that a scheme of management should be made in relation to that scheme. And drafts of a proposed scheme and the proposed management agreement are attached at the end of the report as appendices. So I appreciate, members, that's something a little bit different for you today, but obviously happy to answer questions if that would assist.
Okay, you have got your hand up, Councillor Bridget, but I think I'll ask, who's the local member? Would you wish to comment first, Councillor Patson? Thank you.
Well, I would just like to say how much I support this, if I could, Chair, if that's all right.
Yes, it is.
Newton by the Sea Parish Council are devoted to the village, and it is a beautiful village. I think anyone who's been to Newton by the Sea will agree with that. They spend a lot of time and expense on grass cutting. The council do cut the common as a courtesy, but the parish council also pay extra for enhancement to make sure it's always kept trim and trimmed, and it is actually the first thing you see really as you enter into the village. So I'm really very much in support of this, and I do. I'm happy to go with both recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Bridget.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. This is one of those things, and we get it at full council where we're doing a boundary review, and I'll always go with what the local member, whether it's for or against. It's one of those issues, and Wendy's indicated that she's happy with it, so I'm happy to second Wendy's proposal there. But what I would say is, and I just want, did you write this report personally, Helen?
I did.
It's a really well-written report.
Oh,
it is exceptionally well written, and I don't say that very often, but it is really good, so well done. But I'm happy to support Wendy's proposal.
Thank you very much. I've seconded. Councillor Thorne.
Yes. You know, I was just interested in your comment about fencing, in as much as, you know, when I've been to Newton by the Sea recently, I've noticed that there's not fencing, but there's a whole host of bollards round about, obviously protecting the common, which, you know, I think personally takes something away from it. But, you know, you were saying that if you haven't a scheme, you don't get the fencing up. Once you have got a scheme, they can decide whether they want to put fencing up or not.
Yes,
I was just wondering where we stand at the minute, where the parish council have obviously...
Yes, and I should say the parish council hasn't specifically mentioned fencing. That's just an example from the DAFRA guidance.
So I don't know, where do those bollards stand? Where, you know, we haven't got a scheme at the minute, but the parish council have thought it necessary to put all those bollards around, which...
As I understand it, Chess, certainly there are provisions for such measures. However, I would have to check. It's a long time since I've looked at that.
But what you're saying is that once the scheme becomes adopted, then the parish council can really look after it legally.
I mean, yes, Chair. The terms of the scheme are actually annexed, and it's quite archaic language.
No,
it does enable more to be done.
Yeah, I'm in full support of protecting.
Good. On that question, does Councillor Patterson wish to comment as a parish councillor?
The bollards were put into place some considerable years ago, and it was really due to the popularity of the Joiners Arms, which was so tremendous. The car parking on the common just took away all the grass, and so it just looked like a pile of mud. And so that was the reason. And of course, there is a very big car park on the entry point into Newton, and it's only a 2-minute walk from that car park to the Joiners Arms. And so that was the reason they were put in many years ago, just to protect the green.
Thank you.
Chair,
yes,
I should declare an interest at this point. I'm sorry, I wasn't going on to that, but, you know, my friend is in business there. And, so
that's not really in front of us, so I think we can accept that statement.
Thank you.
And I think probably, unless there are any other comments which to be made by members, I will ask the members to vote on the seconded. Do we approve the recommendations in front of us? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday at 1 o'clock the same time. Well, sorry, thank you. Yes, would you please keep your agendas? Sorry, who shouted me? Yes. Oh yes, can we on record say we have noted the 106 agreements there, which I didn't cover when I should have done. Thank you. Is that agreed? Okay. It appears to be. Thank you.